Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about efforts by Democratic lawmakers so far in California and New York to prevent ICE agents from wearing masks. If you haven't seen pictures of this, you should. It is really intimidating and evocative of an authoritarian state. They come in with their faces completely obscured and start banging heads, and it's part and process of an overall series of abuses where these guys, and we'll get to this more in another YouTube, are just flagrantly violating the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment rights of the people that they are arresting, even though they have no authority to arrest them. And they're coming in en masse and masked and just are completely intimidating, like total embodiments of the worst kind of authoritarian society. So California has introduced a bill, and it has all the kinds of caveats that you might think about. First, it covers both ICE agents and protesters alike. So it also would or purport to outlaw people, and this has especially come up in pro-Palestinian demonstrations, people obscuring their faces also and being unable to be identified, including in the instances in which they've been abusive and roughed up other students and the like. But it's really about the ICE agents, and California exempts in certain ways appropriately that we don't have to go into, and New York is beginning these same talks. Now, ICE is very defiant and confrontational, and what they say is we have to wear these masks to protect ourselves. It's rough out there. We have protesters, and without the masks, I mean, they don't really follow through. Presumably, without the mask, people can't identify them. And without being able to identify them, they can't as easily identify abuses. It's not as if the masks protect them from physical harm or anything of that nature. But what they are saying, and they're saying it in a very kind of confrontational way, we have to do this because otherwise they're out there dealing with, and we have the same old canard of all the murderers and hooligans, etc. We don't have a single instance where people have seemed to be attacked, but that's what we have to do it. Officers, says the DHS, are trying to protect themselves from doxing and harassment. Well, doxing means they find out who they are and try to push back or possibly prosecute them. And that's not something they should have a right to be protected from. Even harassment, if it's verbal, no right to be protected from. Ask any police officer. Part and parcel of their jobs are taking guff and heat from surrounding residents, and that is what is happening here. There's another point that at least the proponents of the bill are making, which is we can't tell these guys are bona fide. They come in and start, screaming and issuing commands. They are really not doing it according to the book, and nothing even close. And so the pro legislators in both California and New York are saying that's another reason that we need it. Okay, so that the sort of arguments are set up, and to my mind, they really are much stronger for the proponents of the bill. Nobody has yet cottoned on to this, so as your pointy-headed talking heads YouTube correspondent, let me just say that it may encounter, including the ones against demonstrators, constitutional challenges. And that is because there is a First Amendment right generally to have one's speech be anonymous. The Supreme Court has decided that in cases involving campaign finance. and people making very strong claims. I want to know who this is, who's throwing all this money in. And the court said, actually, the people have a First Amendment right. So it could be, at least as to the protesters, and query whether that would potentially extend to law enforcement, that there's something on the other side involving their own rights. I just flag that. But the main argument, as they're going to come down, are, on the one hand, we don't know, they're fearsome, they're terroristic, and they are. All those things are right. And officers are, and the DHS is going to say, yes, but we need this to protect ourselves. It's so dangerous out there. Now, the problem with that kind of claim is it's not enough to just sort of say it and assert, man, it's tough out there. If the whatever interests the state has, and I think they do have interest in their citizens not being basically intimidated and left in the dark about whether these really are agents, I can imagine instances in which it's possible for law enforcement to prevail over them, to challenge and say, look, we've got to do this to protect ourselves. But, they go into battle, and there are people with, and this has happened, think about Waco, for example, and there are people lying in wait with guns. You suit up and do whatever you need to do to protect yourself, and that's a compelling state interest. But just this mere assertion that they're going to dox us, heck yeah, they're going to dox them. They want to know who's doing this stuff and hold them accountable. And they're going to harass them. Heck yeah, they're going to harass them. And cops don't have, or law enforcement officers don't have a right not to be harassed. So it really should come down to an actual facts on the ground. Are the justifications that the government is proffering legit, substantiated by the record, or are they just sort of make weight and abstract? Now, it's the kind of thing, the kind of interest that judges, I think, would be fairly solicitous of. But if litigated right, this is going to be about, this is what's happening on the ground, and the things that they are talking about, Your Honor, they're not happening at all. No ICE agent has been put in physical danger and the like, at least, so far. Now, of course, I think, even as I say this, there have been a couple instances where people have thrown rocks at cars and the like. So we'll see what kind of record they possibly can make. But the main point number one, this is totally happening, and it feels completely like a police state and frightening. Anonymous troops coming in and beginning to bang heads. And that's just as a specter of kind of constitutional abuse. It is vivid and only getting worse. That's on the one hand. On the other, the arguments about why it might be justified in either direction, I think they are strong already for the plaintiffs or their legislators, who are saying people are being frightened, people are can't tell who the people are. You should be able to identify police officers, and then we'll see what kind of record the officers, the feds, can make in return. And remember, these are civil proceedings, right? They want to take advantage of, and we'll get to this in another YouTube, they want to have all the advantages of if you're going in and taking down a drug dealer and shooting first and asking questions later and the like. Immigration enforcement is a civil proceeding. That's why they're coming in often with non-criminal warrants, administrative warrants, and they don't have that. First, it's never been the practice. It's always been the practice when immigration authorities come to detain someone, they come in plain clothes. They talk politely. They do exactly the opposite of the sort of jackbooted thug approach that the current ICE is doing, and seeming to me anyway to be doing with a real element of zeal and hostility toward the people that they are investigating. So that should be even less justification for what they're trying to do. They're trying in general to have all the advantages of law enforcement, but without the commensurate responsibilities. So this could play out in a First Amendment-y way, in a criminal enforcement kind of way, or what it shouldn't do is play out in just an abstract way where the ICE can simply proffer, well, we don't want to get hurt. We don't want to be doxxed. That shouldn't be enough for a district court judge who receives facts and decides what to do, and much less a court of appeals or even Supreme Court justice who looks at it. So there you have it, a concerted effort by Dem legislators to take these masks and the whole kind of terroristic law enforcement out of the equation and make it just somewhat calmer. I mean, we also know there have been injuries and deaths caused by these kinds of crazy, over-the-top, violent operations done by ICE themselves. So we'll see whether the initiatives pass in California and New York, and then B, you'll see certain kinds of challenges probably in federal court by the federal government saying, oh, you can't do this supremacy. We have to be able to protect our officers and the like. But that's a little bit down the road. I think it's noteworthy even now, just as a demonstration that people are pushing back and not liking these what seem like very fascistic military-style operations to find and round up and deport people, often violating constitutional limits. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.